Marcus Riley's hand shook as he unwrapped the peanut butter sandwich. His daughter Emma had made it that morning, carefully spreading the cheap store brand with a butter knife she could barely grip at 5 years old. The bread was white, 49 cents a loaf, and the crusts were uneven where she'd cut them with safety scissors because they couldn't afford a proper lunchbox with compartments. He sat on the concrete bench outside County General Hospital, the November cold seeping through his thin work pants. His shift started in 8 minutes. 8 minutes to eat, to breathe, to pretend he wasn't drowning. The man appeared from behind the dumpsters. Older, maybe 70, with a beard that had gone gray in patches and clothes that might have been blue once but were now the color of sidewalk grime. He moved slowly, favoring his left leg, and his eyes fixed on Marcus's sandwich with an intensity that made Marcus's chest tighten. Marcus knew that look. He'd worn it himself 3 months ago when the electric company shut off their power and Emma had asked why dinner was cold cereal again. "Hey," Marcus said. The word came out rough. He cleared his throat. "You hungry?" The old man stopped. His eyes, pale blue and watery, darted from Marcus's face to the sandwich and back. He didn't speak. Marcus broke the sandwich in half. The peanut butter stretched between the pieces, and he thought about how Emma had used almost a quarter of the jar, not knowing they had to make it last 2 more weeks. He thought about his own stomach, empty since yesterday's dinner of ramen noodles and tap water. He thought about none of it mattering more than the look in this man's eyes. "Hey." Marcus stood, crossed the 3 feet between them, and held out half the sandwich. The old man's hand trembled worse than Marcus's ever had. His fingers were dark with dirt, the nails cracked and yellow. He took the sandwich like it was made of glass. "Thank you," he whispered. His voice cracked on both words. They ate in silence. Marcus watched the man chew slowly, carefully, like every bite had to be savored because he didn't know when the next would come. Marcus understood that too. The sandwich was gone in 90 seconds. The bread stuck in Marcus's throat, dry and thick, but he swallowed it down because throwing food away was something people with money did. The old man wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "You're kind," he said. "Not many kind people left." Marcus shrugged. "Just a sandwich. Not to me." Something in the man's voice made Marcus look at him more carefully. Beneath the grime and the beard, beneath the layers of flannel shirts and the duct-taped shoes, there was something else. A straightness to his spine. A clarity in those watery eyes that didn't match the shaking hands or the hesitant voice. "You take care of yourself," Marcus said. He glanced at his phone. 3 minutes until his shift. If he was late again, Henderson would write him up. 3 write-ups and he was done. 2 strikes already sat in his file. The old man nodded. He turned away, back toward the dumpsters and the alley beyond, and Marcus headed for the staff entrance. He was reaching for the door when the shouting started. "Stop! Somebody stop him!" Marcus spun. A woman in expensive running clothes sprinted across the parking lot, her phone clutched in her hand. She was pointing at the old man, who had frozen mid-step. "He tried to rob me. He threatened me." More people appeared. A security guard, 2 nurses, a man in a suit. They converged on the old man like wolves. "Wait," Marcus said, but his voice was lost in the chaos. "I saw him," the woman panted. She'd reached them now, her face flushed pink from more than just running. "He came at me near my car. He demanded money. He had something in his hand. I don't know what. Maybe a knife." "I didn't," the old man said. His voice was so quiet Marcus barely heard it. "I didn't do anything." The security guard, a thick-necked man named Torres, grabbed the old man's arm. "Let's go. Police are on their way." "No, wait." Marcus pushed forward. "I was just talking to him." "He didn't." "You know this guy." Torres didn't let go of the old man's arm. "No, but I was sitting right there." Marcus pointed at the bench. "I shared my lunch with him. He's been here the whole time." "He couldn't have." "How would you know? You were eating." The woman's voice went sharp. "I know what I saw. He came at me. I barely got away." Something was wrong. Marcus could feel it in his gut, the same instinct that told him when Emma was lying about finishing her homework or when the landlord was about to raise the rent. The old man's eyes had gone distant. He wasn't fighting, wasn't protesting, just standing there like he'd already given up. The police arrived 4 minutes later. 2 officers, both young, both looking at the old man like he was something they'd scraped off their shoes. They listened to the woman's story. They nodded when she described the threat, the fee, the narrow escape. "What about you?" One officer, badge reading J. Patterson, turned to Marcus. "You see any of this?" "No. I was right here with him. We were eating. He didn't go anywhere near her car." "Where's her car?" "Over there." The woman pointed to a silver Mercedes at the far end of the lot. Marcus's stomach sank. He'd been facing away from that direction. He hadn't seen the parking lot. He'd been watching the old man eat his daughter's sandwich. "So you didn't actually see what happened?" Patterson said. It wasn't a question. At that moment, right there in that parking lot with the cold wind cutting through his thin jacket and his shift starting in -2 minutes, Marcus thought about keeping his mouth shut. He thought about Henderson's write-ups and Emma's empty cupboards and the electricity bill that was already 15 days overdue. He thought about how easy it would be to just walk away, to say he didn't know, to let the system handle it. But he looked at the old man's face and saw Emma's face when she'd handed him that sandwich this morning. So proud she'd made it herself, so happy to help. "I don't believe her," Marcus said. The words came out steady, clear. He didn't do anything wrong. The atmosphere shifted. Everyone turned to look at Marcus. The woman's mouth fell open. Torres's grip on the old man's arm tightened. Patterson's expression went cold. "Excuse me," the woman said. "I don't believe you. He was with me. He didn't threaten anyone. Are you calling me a liar?" Marcus met her eyes. "Yeah, I am." What happened next happened fast. The woman's face went from pink to red. She started talking louder, faster, about how offensive this was, how she'd been traumatized. How dare this janitor accuse her of lying when she was a victim here? The other officer, badge reading K. Mills, stepped closer to Marcus. "Sir, I need you to calm down." "I am calm. I'm just telling you what I saw." "You just said you didn't see anything." "I saw him. I saw him eating. I saw him standing in the same spot the whole time. He didn't go near her car." Torres finally spoke up. "Riley, you need to get inside. You're already late." Marcus had forgotten about Torres knowing his name, had forgotten about his shift, had forgotten about everything except the old man's eyes, which had focused on Marcus with something like surprise, like he hadn't expected anyone to stand up for him. "Not until you let him go," Marcus said. "That's not your call." Patterson pulled out his handcuffs. "So, you under arrest for attempted robbery." The old man didn't resist, didn't speak, just let them cuff his hands behind his back, his shoulders slumping forward in a way that made him look even smaller than he already was. "This is wrong," Marcus said. "You need to leave," Mills said, "or you'll be charged with interfering." "Let them take me," the old man said. His voice was soft but clear. He looked at Marcus. "You tried. That's more than most would do." They led him away. The woman was already on her phone, probably calling her lawyer or her husband or posting about her traumatic experience on social media. Torres looked at Marcus with something like pity. "Get inside, Riley. Henderson's probably already got your termination papers ready." Marcus watched the police car drive away. He thought about the sandwich, about Emma's careful spreading of the peanut butter, about the old man's trembling hands and whispered thank you. He thought about how doing the right thing was supposed to matter. Then he pushed open the staff entrance and went to clean the toilets on the 3rd floor, because that's what people like him did. They survived. They kept their heads down. They didn't make trouble, except he just had. And somewhere in the back of his mind, in a place he didn't want to examine too closely, Marcus wondered if that was the last sandwich he'd ever be able to afford to share. At roughly the 600-word mark in this moment, as Marcus stood there watching the police car disappear around the corner and feeling the weight of what he'd just done settle on his shoulders, he felt more alone than he'd ever felt. Not just alone in the parking lot or alone in his decision, but alone in the world. Standing up had made him visible in the worst way, had painted a target on his back, and he wondered if anyone else out there understood what it meant to risk everything for a stranger. He wondered if there were people watching this moment, witnesses to these small acts of defiance that happened every day in hospital parking lots and bus stops and grocery store lines. If you're watching this, wherever you are in the world, drop a comment and let me know where you're from. Sometimes knowing someone else is paying attention makes the loneliness a little easier to bear. Sometimes it helps to know you're not the only one who thinks doing the right thing still matters, even when it costs everything. The hospital's staff entrance closed behind him with a mechanical hiss. Marcus walked down the fluorescent-lit hallway toward the janitorial closet, his footsteps echoing off the linoleum. His phone buzzed in his pocket. 3 texts from Henderson, each one shorter and angrier than the last. He had 8 minutes to change into his uniform and grab his cleaning cart. 8 minutes before Henderson could officially write him up for tardiness. 8 minutes before his life got even harder. But all Marcus could think about was the old man's face. The gratitude in those watery blue eyes. The way he'd said thank you like those 2 words meant something. Marcus pushed open the closet door and reached for his uniform shirt. His hands were still shaking. 18 months ago, Marcus Riley had been a different person. He'd had a wife, a real apartment with heat that worked and a refrigerator that hummed through the night. He'd had a job at an automotive plant 40 minutes outside the city, operating machinery that stamped out door panels for trucks he'd never be able to afford. The work had been loud and repetitive, but it had paid $17 an hour with benefits. It had been enough. Then Sarah got sick. It started with fatigue, then headaches. Then one morning she collapsed in the kitchen making Emma's breakfast, and the ambulance came, and the doctors used words like aggressive and metastatic and experimental treatments. The insurance company used different words like pre-existing condition and not covered and out of network. Sarah died on a Tuesday in April. The funeral cost $8,000. The medical bills totaled $234,000. Marcus sold everything they owned that wasn't essential. The car, the furniture, Sarah's jewelry, her mother's china. He sold it all and it barely made a dent. The plant laid him off 6 weeks after the funeral. Downsizing, they called it. Restructuring. He got 2 weeks severance and a handshake from a manager who couldn't meet his eyes. He applied for unemployment. He applied for every job he could find. But taking care of Emma meant he couldn't work nights, couldn't travel, couldn't be flexible with his schedule. The janitor position at County General paid $12 an hour. No benefits, no sick days. But it was walking distance from the subsidized housing unit they'd moved into after losing their apartment, and the shift ended at 3 so he could pick Emma up from kindergarten. He took it. That was 8 months ago. Now Marcus's day started at 4 in the morning when Emma crawled into his bed because she had nightmares about Mommy not breathing. He held her until she fell back asleep, then got up at 5 to make her breakfast with whatever was left in the cupboards. Cereal if they were lucky. Toast with butter if they weren't. He walked her to school at 7:30, walked himself to the hospital by 8, cleaned toilets and mopped floors and emptied bedpans until 3, picked Emma up, took her to the public library because it was warm and free and had books, made dinner from the food pantry donations, helped with homework, read her a story, and collapsed into bed by 9. Every day. The same routine, the same exhaustion, the same quiet desperation of watching his daughter grow up in poverty and being unable to stop it. He was invisible, just another body in a uniform pushing a mop cart through hallways where doctors and nurses barely registered his existence. He cleaned up after people who made in a day what he made in a month. He scrubbed their messes and fixed their mistakes and never complained because complaining meant getting fired, and getting fired meant Emma went hungry. That morning, after sharing his sandwich with the old man, after watching him get arrested, after standing up to the woman in expensive running clothes, Marcus had made himself invisible again. He put on his uniform. He grabbed his cart. He'd spent 6 hours on his knees scrubbing floors and wiping down surfaces and trying not to think about what he'd done. But the hospital had cameras, and people talked. And by noon, everyone knew. Henderson found him in the second-floor bathroom. Marcus was elbow-deep in a clogged toilet when the supervisor walked in, arms crossed, face set in stone. "My office. Now." Marcus dried his hands, followed Henderson down the corridor, felt every eye in the building tracking his movement. Henderson's office was barely bigger than a closet. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet overflowing with paperwork. Henderson's Saturday didn't invite Marcus to do the same. "Want to tell me what happened this morning?" "I was eating my lunch. An old man asked for food. I shared. Then someone accused him of trying to rob her. He didn't. I said so." You accused a hospital patron of lying. She was lying. Henderson leaned back in his chair. Here's what's going to happen. That woman, she's married to Gerald Thornton. You know who that is? Marcus shook his head. Board of Directors. Major hospital donor. The new cardiac wing? That's Thornton money. His wife calls him crying about how she was nearly mugged and then accused of making it up by some janitor, and he calls the hospital administrator, and the administrator calls me. Henderson pulled out a form. I have to let you go. The words took a moment to land. When they did, Marcus felt the floor tilt. You're firing me. I don't have a choice. I didn't do anything wrong. You created a hostile environment for a hospital patron. You interfered with a police matter. You were late to your shift. Henderson pushed the termination papers across the desk. Sign here. Marcus looked at the form, at the black text that said his employment was terminated effective immediately, at the signature line waiting for his name. I have a daughter. I'm sorry. I need this job. You should have thought about that before you opened your mouth. Something cold settled in Marcus's chest. Not anger, not even surprise, just a deep, bone-tired acceptance of how the world worked. People like Gerald Thornton's wife could lie and be believed. People like Marcus could tell the truth and lose everything. He signed the paper. Henderson took it back. Security will escort you out. Clean out your locker. Don't come back. The walk to the locker room felt endless. People stared, whispered. A few looked sympathetic. Most looked away. Marcus emptied his locker into a plastic bag. His space shirt. A photo of Emma. A protein bar he'd been saving for an emergency. Security walked him to the exit. Not Torres this time. A younger guard who looked embarrassed to be there. For what it's worth, the guard said quietly. Everyone knows she was lying. We saw the footage. Old guy never went near her car. Marcus stopped. What? Security cameras. Whole parking lot. He was exactly where you said he was. She made the whole thing up. Does anyone else know this? The guard shook his head. Management won't release it. Thornton wants it buried. So I got fired for telling the truth. Yeah. The guard opened the door. I really am sorry, man. Marcus walked out into the afternoon sun. It was 2:30. He had 30 minutes before Emma got out of school. 30 minutes to figure out how to tell his 5-year-old daughter that daddy lost his job again, that they had no money for rent, that the food pantry donations would have to stretch even further. He made it 3 blocks before his phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Mr. Riley? This is Detective Patterson. We spoke this morning. I need you to come down to the station. Marcus's stomach dropped. Why? Mrs. Thornton is pressing charges. She says you harassed and threatened her. We need your statement. I didn't threaten anyone. That's not what she says. And we have 3 witnesses who heard you call her a liar in front of multiple people. That's defamation. Possible harassment. Come in voluntarily or we'll issue a warrant. The detective hung up. Marcus stood on the sidewalk. People walked past him, wrapped in coats that looked warm, carrying shopping bags from stores he'd never be able to afford. A bus pulled up and discharged passengers. The world kept moving like nothing had changed. Like his life wasn't collapsing in real time. His phone buzzed again. Text message from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Check your email. Marcus opened his email app. New message. No subject line. The sender was just a string of numbers. He clicked it. Inside was a link to an article. Local news website. The headline made his vision blur. Hospital janitor harasses assault victim. Claims attempted robbery was made up. There was a photo. Him. Standing in the parking lot this morning. The angle made him look aggressive, confrontational. The article described him as a disgruntled employee with a history of disciplinary issues. It quoted Mrs. Thornton extensively. Her fear, her trauma, the way this janitor had verbally assaulted her after she'd barely escaped an attempted mugging. The old man wasn't mentioned at all. Marcus refreshed his email. 3 new messages. 5, 10, 20, all from the same news article being shared and reshared. By the time he reached Emma's school, the story had been picked up by 2 TV stations and was trending on social media. By 5 o'clock, he'd become infamous. Emma knew something was wrong the moment she saw him. She was 5, but she was smart, and she'd learned to read his moods the way other kids learn to read picture books. "Daddy's tired," he said. "Let's go home." They walked the 6 blocks to their apartment building. Marcus held Emma's hand and tried not to think about the rent that was due in 4 days, about the $12 in his checking account, about the protein bar in his plastic bag that might have to be dinner for both of them. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor. 1 bedroom. Emma slept in the bedroom. Marcus slept on a mattress on the living room floor. The walls were thin enough that they could hear their neighbors arguing most nights. The heat worked, but only if they kept the thermostat below 65. The stove had 2 working burners. Emma dropped her backpack by the door. "I'm hungry." Marcus opened the cupboard. 1 box of macaroni and cheese. Half a jar of peanut butter. 3 crackers left in a sleeve. The refrigerator held a gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow and half an apple. "How about macaroni?" he said. Emma's face fell. "We had that yesterday." "I know, baby, but it's what we have. Where's the grocery money?" Marcus knelt down to her level. He wanted to lie, wanted to tell her everything would be fine. But Emma deserved better than lies. "Daddy lost his job today." Her eyes went wide. "Why?" "Because I told the truth when someone wanted me to lie. But Mommy said telling the truth is good." Mommy was right. It is good. Sometimes good things have consequences. Emma processed this. Then, quietly, "Are we going to be okay?" At roughly the 800-word mark of this chapter, Marcus pulled Emma into a hug and held her tight while his mind raced through impossible calculations. How long could they survive on nothing? How many days until eviction? How far could he stretch $12? In that moment, holding his daughter and feeling the weight of their situation crush down on him, he thought about all the people he'd known over the years who'd been in similar situations. People who'd stood up when they should have stayed quiet. People who'd helped strangers when they should have looked away. He thought about how those stories needed to be told, how the world needed to remember that choosing kindness shouldn't lead to punishment. If this story means something to you, if you've ever been in a place where doing right felt impossible, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me your truth. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss what happens next, because this story isn't over. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Check the description below for resources if you're struggling like Marcus is. We're all connected in ways we don't always see, and sometimes the simple act of bearing witness is the most powerful thing we can do. Your engagement here matters more than you know. Marcus held his daughter and whispered, "We're going to be okay," knowing it was probably a lie but needing to say it anyway. That night, after Emma fell asleep, Marcus sat on his mattress and scrolled through his phone. The article had gone viral. Thousands of comments. Most of them sided with Mrs. Thornton, called him aggressive, threatening, said he should be arrested for harassment. A few people tried to defend him but got shouted down. Someone had found his Facebook page, his address, Emma's school. The threats started rolling in around 8 p.m. People saying he deserved to lose his job, deserved worse, saying they hoped his daughter got taken away, saying they'd make sure he never worked in this city again. Marcus deleted his social media accounts, changed his phone number, but the damage was done. He couldn't sleep, lay on his mattress staring at the ceiling and listening to Emma's breathing in the next room. His chest hurt. His head hurt. Everything hurt. Around 3 in the morning, he got up to use the bathroom, flipped on the light, saw his reflection in the mirror above the sink. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed, stubble on his jaw because he couldn't afford new razors. But it was the look in his eyes that stopped him. The same look the old man had worn when the police handcuffed him. Defeat. Marcus splashed water on his face, told himself to be stronger, to fight harder, to not give up. But standing there in that tiny bathroom at 3 in the morning with $12 to his name and a daughter sleeping in the next room, and the whole city turned against him, Marcus felt something inside him crack. He slid down the wall, sat on the cold tile floor, put his head in his hands, and for the first time since Sarah died, Marcus Riley let himself cry. 3 miles across the city, in a penthouse apartment overlooking the downtown skyline, someone else couldn't sleep. Jameson Cole stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows and watched the city lights shimmer against the darkness. At 7 to 2, he'd spent the last 3 years doing exactly this. Standing, watching, waiting for something he couldn't name. His apartment was obscenely large for one person. 4 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms, a kitchen he never used because his meals came from restaurants or were prepared by his housekeeper. The furniture was expensive and uncomfortable. The art on the walls had been selected by an interior designer. Nothing in this space belonged to him in any meaningful way. Jameson had made his fortune in commercial real estate. Decades of buying low and selling high, of seeing potential where others saw decay, of turning abandoned properties into luxury developments. He'd been ruthless when he needed to be, fair when he could afford it. He'd built an empire that spanned 6 states and employed thousands of people. Then his wife Margaret died of complications from pneumonia, and his daughter Linda stopped returning his calls, and his son Robert threatened legal action if Jameson ever tried to contact Robert's children again. The fortune remained. The family disappeared. For the last 3 years, Jameson had been learning what it meant to be truly wealthy and completely alone. He'd started the disguise as an experiment, a lark. He wanted to see how the other half lived, wanted to understand the city from ground level instead of from boardroom windows. He bought clothes from thrift stores, let his beard grow, stopped using his credit cards. He spent his days walking the streets, sleeping in shelters, eating at soup kitchens. Nobody recognized him. Nobody looked at him at all. He was invisible in a way he'd never been before. It was freeing and terrifying in equal measure. This morning, he'd been behind the dumpsters at County General, trying to decide if he should give up the experiment and go home, when a young man sat down on a nearby bench with a peanut butter sandwich. Jameson had watched him, seen the exhaustion in his posture, the way he looked at that sandwich like it represented more than just food. When the young man offered half without hesitation, without judgment, Jameson had felt something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Then the woman appeared, started screaming. The lies poured out of her mouth so easily, so automatically, that Jameson almost admired the performance. Almost. He'd been handcuffed before the young man could finish defending him. Spent 6 hours in a holding cell before his lawyer arrived and convinced the police they'd made a terrible mistake. Jameson was released with apologies. The charges evaporated. No arrest record. No consequences. But the young man, the janitor, Marcus Riley, he'd faced consequences. Jameson had called the hospital that afternoon, pretended to be considering a donation, asked about the incident. They'd told him everything. The firing, the media coverage, the threats. Now Jameson stood at his window and thought about that sandwich, about Marcus's steady voice saying, "I don't believe her," about the cost of telling the truth. He walked to his home office, pulled up the hospital security footage on his computer. He called in a favor to get access. Watched the entire incident from 3 different camera angles. Marcus had been telling the truth. The footage proved it. Jameson had never gone near Mrs. Thornton's car. She'd made up the entire story, probably because she was embarrassed about making eye contact with a homeless person and wanted to justify her discomfort with a narrative that made her the victim. Jameson saved the footage to a secure drive. Then he started digging deeper. Marcus Riley, age 34, widowed. 1 daughter, Emma, age 5. Previously employed at Morrison Automotive until the plant closed its second shift. Medical debt totaling over $200,000 from his wife's cancer treatment. Currently residing in subsidized housing in the Fletcher Street complex. Jameson pulled up Marcus's bank records. It took 1 phone call to his accountant. $12.37. That was everything Marcus had in the world. The apartment records showed rent was due in 4 days. $750. Marcus didn't have it. Would never have it in time. Eviction would follow. Then what? Shelters? Foster care for Emma? Jameson thought about his own children. About how Robert had forbidden him from seeing his grandchildren because Jameson had missed too many birthdays, too many school plays, too busy building an empire to build relationships. About how Linda had stopped calling after he criticized her choice of husband, her career, her life. About how right they'd been to cut him out. He pulled up more information. Emma's school, Fletcher Elementary. The record showed she was on the free lunch program. Good grades. Perfect attendance. A note from her teacher. Emma is bright and engaged but often seems tired. Mentioned her father works early mornings. Please check on home situation. Nobody had checked. Nobody cared enough to look. Jameson opened his safe. Inside were documents he hadn't touched in 3 years. His will, his trust documents, contact information for Linda and Robert, a photo of Margaret from their wedding day, her smile bright and real in a way it never quite was again. He thought about the sandwich, about Marcus's shaking hands, about the decision to share when sharing meant going hungry. At roughly the 400-word mark of this investigation, as Jameson sat there surrounded by evidence of Marcus's quiet heroism and devastating punishment, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about one man's injustice anymore. This was about how quickly truth could be buried when power wanted it gone. How easily a good deed could be twisted into a crime when the right people needed a villain. Stories like Marcus's happened every day in this city, in every city, but most of them never got told because the people living them were too busy surviving to demand justice. The truth needed to spread, needed to be witnessed, needed to matter in a concrete way. If you're watching this and you understand why this matters, if you see the pattern of how power protects itself, then I'm asking you to take action right now. Hit the like button to push this story to more people. Drop a comment with your thoughts because engagement tells the algorithm this matters. Subscribe to this channel so you're here for what happens next. Share this video with 3 people who need to understand how the system actually works. Check the description for a breakdown of the legal and social structures that enable this kind of injustice. The only way stories like Marcus's change is when enough people refuse to look away. Your clicks and comments aren't just metrics. They're a form of witness, and right now Marcus needs witnesses more than he needs anything else. Jameson picked up his phone, called his head of security. I need a full report on a woman named Thornton. First name Charlotte. Married to Gerald Thornton. I need everything. Financial records, social media, purchase history. Everywhere she's been for the last month. And I need security footage from County General Hospital, all angles, time-stamped. When do you need this? 2 hours ago. Jameson hung up, called his lawyer next. We're going to war, he said. Get the litigation team ready. Also, I need you to quietly purchase some property. Fletcher Street subsidized housing. The whole complex. Don't let them know I'm the buyer. The lawyer didn't ask why. Good lawyers never did. Jameson made 6 more calls. To his accountant, his media consultant, his contact at the district attorney's office, his chief operating officer. Each conversation was brief and to the point. By the time he finished, the sun was starting to rise. He pulled up Marcus's address on his computer. Fletcher Street was 40 minutes away. Jameson hadn't driven himself anywhere in 5 years. He'd forgotten what it felt like to have a destination that mattered. He changed out of his expensive pajamas into a suit that cost more than Marcus made in 6 months. Called for his driver. Walked to the private elevator that would take him to the parking garage. On the way down, he tried to remember the last time he'd felt this alive. This purposeful. He couldn't. The city looked different at dawn. Sharper. More real. Jameson watched it pass through the tinted windows of his town car and thought about all the years he'd spent building buildings and missing the people who lived inside them. His phone buzzed. Text from his head of security. Preliminary report ready. It's worse than you thought. Jameson opened the attachment. 15 pages. Photos. Bank records. Social media screenshots. A pattern of behavior spanning 5 years. Charlotte Thornton had filed 17 complaints against service workers. Claimed harassment 9 times. Assault twice. Each complaint had been quietly settled by her husband's money and influence. Each victim had lost their job. 3 had left the city entirely. Marcus was just the latest. Jameson kept reading. Charlotte's social media was a parade of performative victimhood. Every inconvenience became a trauma. Every interaction with someone below her social class became a brush with danger. She collected sympathy the way some people collected art. The final page showed her current location. Tagged at a luxury spa downtown. Getting a seaweed wrap and complaining about her stressful week. Jameson told his driver to change course. Meanwhile, across town, Marcus was discovering new depths to rock bottom. He'd walked Emma to school that morning with the last of their food in her lunchbox. Half an apple, 3 crackers, a juice box from the food pantry, Emma had looked at it and said nothing, which somehow hurt worse than if she'd complained. At the school entrance, Emma hugged him tighter than usual. "It's going to be okay, Daddy." Marcus knelt down. "How do you know that?" "Because you always make it okay." She walked into the building, turned once to wave. Marcus waved back, waited until she disappeared around a corner. Then he walked to the nearest clinic because the pain in his chest that had started yesterday was getting worse. The nurse at the free clinic took one look at him and called for a doctor. They ran tests, asked questions about stress, sleep, diet, looked at him with expressions that tried to hide pity but failed. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high," the doctor said. "You're severely malnourished. When did you last eat a full meal?" Marcus tried to remember. 3 days ago. Maybe 4. "You need to be admitted." "I can't afford that. This is a free clinic. I can't leave my daughter. She gets out of school in 6 hours." The doctor was young. Probably hadn't been practicing long enough to get numb to cases like Marcus. "If you don't get treatment, you could have a stroke. You could die. Then I'll die after I pick up my daughter." They gave him medication. Blood pressure pills he couldn't afford to refill. A pamphlet about stress management that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Instructions to rest and eat regular meals and avoid stressful situations. Marcus walked out of the clinic and straight to a temp agency. Filled out paperwork. Took a drug test. Waited 3 hours for an assignment that never came. The woman at the desk wouldn't meet his eyes when she said they had nothing available. He tried 4 more agencies. Same story. Word had spread. The janitor who'd attacked a hospital donor. Nobody wanted to touch him. By noon, Marcus was sitting on a bench in a public park, trying to figure out how to explain to Emma that they were going to lose their apartment, that they might have to sleep in a shelter, that Daddy had made a choice and now they both had to live with it. His chest hurt worse. His vision blurred at the edges. He put his head between his knees and tried to breathe. A woman sat down next to him. Older, maybe 60, with kind eyes and worn hands. "You okay, honey?" Marcus shook his head. "Can I pray for you?" "I don't think it'll help." She took his hand anyway, bowed her head, spoke words about grace and mercy and strength to endure. Marcus didn't believe any of it, but he let her hold his hand because human contact was the only thing keeping him tethered to the world. When she finished, she pressed something into his palm. A business card. "If you need help. Real help. Not prayers. They're good people." Marcus looked at the card after she left. St. Vincent's Community Outreach. An address. A phone number. He put it in his pocket and forgot about it immediately because his phone was ringing and it was Emma's school. "Mr. Riley, this is Principal Chen." Emma collapsed during lunch. "She's asking for you. We've called an ambulance." The world tilted. Marcus ran. Ran like his life depended on it. Like Emma's life depended on it. Ran the 12 blocks to Fletcher Elementary School with his chest screaming and his vision narrowing and his lungs burning. He made it to the school just as the ambulance pulled up. Emma was conscious but pale. So pale. The paramedics were checking her vitals, asking questions. How long since she'd eaten? Did she have any medical conditions? Was she on any medications? "She's fine," Marcus said. He climbed into the ambulance. "She just needs food. She hasn't eaten enough. It's my fault." One paramedic looked at him. Really looked. Saw the same signs they'd seen in Emma. Malnutrition. Dehydration. The physical toll of poverty. "When did you last eat, so?" "That doesn't matter." They took them both to County General. Different entrance this time. Emergency room. The same hospital that had fired Marcus 12 hours ago. The nurses recognized him. He saw them whispering. Saw their expressions shift from concern to judgment. Emma held his hand. "I'm sorry, Daddy. I didn't mean to make trouble." "You didn't make trouble. You never make trouble. This is all my fault." They put Emma on in 4. Fed her. Monitored her vitals. She improved quickly once her blood sugar stabilized. The doctor, a different one than the clinic, spoke to Marcus in the hallway. "Your daughter is going to be fine. But Mr. Riley, I have to ask. Is there a reason she's not eating enough?" Marcus could have lied. Should have lied. But he was so tired of lying. "We don't have any food. I lost my job. We have no money." The doctor's expression didn't change. I'm required by law to report suspected neglect to Child Protective Services. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. It's not neglect. I'm trying. I'm doing everything I can. I understand. But your daughter is malnourished. That's a fact. What happens next is up to CPS. Marcus sat down right there in the hallway, put his head in his hands, felt the last piece of his dignity shatter. Emma would be taken away, put in foster care, probably separated from him permanently because he couldn't prove he could provide for her. Couldn't prove anything except that he'd failed in the most fundamental way a parent could fail. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made at her funeral to take care of Emma, to keep her safe, to make sure she grew up loved and protected. He'd broken that promise. Standing up for an old man in a parking lot had cost him everything. His job, his reputation, his daughter. Marcus sat in that hospital corridor and realized he'd reached the end. There was nowhere left to fall, no moves left to make. He'd lost. Emma called for him from inside the room. He stood up, walked back to her, held her hand while the floor dripped and the machines beeped, and somewhere outside these walls, a report was being filed that would destroy what was left of their family. Tell me a story, Daddy, Emma whispered. Tell me the one about the princess who saves herself. Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He had no more stories, no more hope, no more strength. He just held his daughter's hand and waited for the end to come. Jameson Cole walked into County General Hospital at 2:15 in the afternoon. He wore his expensive suit, carried himself like a man who owned buildings and influenced elections. Nobody questioned his presence. Power had its privileges. He found the emergency room, asked at the desk for Marcus Riley. The nurse hesitated, then made a phone call. 2 minutes later, a hospital administrator appeared. I'm sorry, sir. That information is confidential. Jameson handed her his business card, watched her eyes widen as she read the name, watched her make the calculation about what refusing him might cost. Room 7. But there's a situation with CPS. I'm aware. He walked past her before she could ask how he knew. Found room 7. Pushed open the door. Marcus looked up. Recognition flickered across his face. Not from yesterday. From something older. Deeper. Then confusion. You, Marcus said. You were. The beggar. Yes. Jameson closed the door behind him. Looked at the little girl on the bed. Emma. She was small for 5. Dark circles under her eyes that no child should have. But her eyes were bright and intelligent as she studied him. Who are you? Emma asked. Someone who wants to help your father. Everyone says that. Then they don't. Jameson smiled despite himself. You're right not to trust easily. It's a good instinct. But I'm different. How? Because I have the resources to actually change things. And I owe your father a debt. Marcus stood up. I don't need charity. It's not charity. It's restitution. You were fired because you told the truth about what happened to me. You lost everything defending someone you thought was homeless and helpless. That deserves recompense. I don't want your money. Not asking what you want. Telling you what I'm going to do. Jameson pulled out his phone. Made a call. Cancel the CPS report. Yes, you can do that. Because I just became the largest donor to County General's pediatric wing. My lawyers will be in touch about the conditions of that donation. One of them is that this family receives immediate medical and nutritional support. He hung up. Made another call. Transfer $50,000 to Marcus Riley's account. Today. Also, wire the property management company for Fletcher Street housing. I want his rent paid through the end of the year. Marcus was shaking his head. Stop. I can't accept this. You don't have a choice. Your daughter is lying in a hospital bed because you don't have food. That ends now. At roughly the 650-word mark in this moment, as Jameson stood there issuing commands and Marcus stood there overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of help he'd stopped believing existed, something profound was happening. This wasn't just about one man saving another. It was about recognizing that the small acts of kindness we perform without expectation of reward are the ones that echo loudest in the universe. Marcus had shared a sandwich when he had nothing to spare, had stood up for a stranger when silence would have been safer, had chosen principle over survival. And now, in a hospital room where despair had seemed absolute just minutes before, He was being shown that those choices mattered, that someone had been watching, that the universe sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, rewarded the good. If you believe in this kind of justice, if you think stories like this need to be amplified so people remember that doing right can lead to redemption, then I need you to act right now. Hit that like button because every like pushes this video to someone who might be losing faith. Leave a comment about a time you helped someone or someone helped you because those stories matter. Subscribe to this channel so you're here for every chapter of this journey. Share this video with your family, your friends, your social networks because word of mouth is how truth spreads faster than lies. And check the description below for information about organizations that help families like Marcus and Emma. Your engagement isn't passive, it's participation. And right now, Marcus needs every one of us to participate in proving that the good guys can win. I need to make a statement, Marcus said quietly. People think I attacked Mrs. Thornton. My name is everywhere. They think I'm a predator. That's my next call. Jameson dialed again. I need you to set up a press conference. Today, County General, main entrance, 4 o'clock. Get every news outlet in the city. Tell them Jameson Cole has evidence about the Thornton incident. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve. Who is he? I'm not sure yet, Marcus said. But there was something like hope creeping into his voice. The next 2 hours moved fast. Too fast for Marcus to process. Hospital staff brought food. Real food. Sandwiches and fruit and soup. Emma ate slowly, carefully, like she was afraid it might disappear. Marcus couldn't eat it all. His stomach had knotted itself into something too tight for food. Jameson made more calls. To his lawyer, his accountant, his head of security. Each conversation was brief and commanding. Marcus listened and tried to understand how this was happening. How a man he'd shared a sandwich with was dismantling the wall of consequences that had been crushing him. Why are you doing this? Marcus finally asked. Jameson stopped mid-conversation, looked at Marcus with eyes that had seen too much wealth and too little meaning. Because in 3 years of pretending to be homeless, you were the only person who saw me as human. Not a problem. Not a threat. Not invisible. Human. Worth a sandwich. Worth defending. He paused. Because my own children won't speak to me. Because I spent 50 years building an empire and forgot to build a family. Because when I die, nobody will remember me as anything but rich. But maybe if I do this right, someone will remember you as good. The words hung in the air. Emma had fallen asleep, her hand still clutching Marcus's. The machines beeped steadily. Outside the window, the city continued its indifferent rotation. Your wife, Jameson said. Sarah. She had stage 4 ovarian cancer. Treatment at Memorial Hospital. You sold everything to pay for it. Still came up $200,000 short. Creditors have been hounding you for 18 months. Marcus flinched. How do you know that? I know everything. It's what money buys. Information. Influence. The ability to fix things. Jameson sat down in the chair across from Marcus. I'm going to pay off that debt. All of it. Consider it handled. That's too much. I can't. You can. You will. Because refusing won't change anything except make both of us feel worse. Jameson leaned forward. I don't have much time left. Maybe a year. Maybe less. Liver failure. Decades of stress and bad decisions. My children won't be at my funeral. But I can make sure yours grows up knowing her father was brave enough to stand up when it mattered. Marcus felt tears on his face. Didn't remember starting to cry. I don't understand why this is happening. Because sometimes the universe pays attention. Not often, but sometimes. Jameson stood. Now get yourself together. We have a press conference in 90 minutes, and you need to be ready to tell your truth. But while Jameson was making his plans, others were making theirs. Gerald Thornton had not become a hospital board member and major donor by letting janitors threaten his wife's credibility. When he received the call about Jameson Cole's press conference, he moved quickly. He called his lawyer, his publicist, 3 board members, the hospital administrator. Each conversation was the same. Jameson Cole was a senile old man with a savior complex. His information was unreliable. The situation with Marcus Riley was settled. Bringing it up again would only hurt the hospital's reputation. The hospital administrator was easy to convince. The board members less so. But Gerald Thornton had spent 30 years cultivating influence. He knew where everybody was buried, who owed favors, who could be persuaded. By 3:30, the pressure was building. The hospital's legal team arrived, informed Jameson that holding a press conference on hospital property about a personnel matter could result in legal action. Strongly recommended he cancel. Jameson listened, nodded, then said, "Sue me. I'll see you in court." The administrator tried next. Apologetic but firm. The hospital couldn't allow this. It would violate patient privacy, create liability, damage relationships with important donors. "Then I'll hold it on the public sidewalk," Jameson said. "Can't stop me there." At 3:45, Charlotte Thornton herself appeared. She walked into Marcus's hospital room like she owned it. Looked at Marcus with contempt. Looked at Jameson with calculation. "Mr. Cole, I'm a great admirer of your work. Those luxury condos you built on the waterfront? Gorgeous. My husband and I were just saying we should have invested." Jameson didn't smile. "Mrs. Thornton, I understand there's been some confusion about an incident yesterday. I want you to know there are no hard feelings. Mistakes happen." This janitor was clearly confused about what he saw. She turned to Marcus. "I'm willing to drop everything. No charges. No lawsuit. All you have to do is apologize publicly and admit you were wrong." Marcus looked at her expensive clothes and perfect hair and eyes that had never known real hunger. He thought about apologizing, about how easy it would be to just say the words and make this all go away. Then he looked at Emma, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days because she'd finally eaten enough. "No," Marcus said. Charlotte's smile froze. "Excuse me." "I said no. You lied. I'm not going to apologize for telling the truth. You have no idea what you're doing. Your husband is a bully who enables your cruelty." Jameson's voice cut through the room like ice. "And I have security footage proving Marcus was telling the truth. I also have records of 17 similar complaints you filed. 9 harassment claims. Harassment that never actually occurred. You've built your identity on victimhood and destroyed lives for your entertainment." Charlotte's face went pale. "That's defamation. It's documentation. See you at the press conference." She left. 5 minutes later, Gerald Thornton called Jameson's cell. "You're making a mistake. I have friends. The mayor. The governor. People who can make your life very difficult. I'm 72 with terminal liver failure. What exactly are you going to do? Kill me faster?" Thornton tried reason. Tried threats. Tried offering money. Jameson hung up on him. At 4 o'clock, they wheeled Emma down to the hospital's main entrance. She insisted on being there. Said Daddy needed her. Marcus couldn't argue. The crowd was larger than expected. News crews from 6 stations. Reporters from 3 papers. A crowd of onlookers who'd heard something was happening. Hospital security trying to manage the chaos. Jameson stood at a microphone someone had set up on the sidewalk. Marcus stood next to him, holding Emma's hand. The cameras pointed at them like weapons. "Thank you for coming," Jameson said. His voice carried across the crowd without strain. Years of boardroom presentations had taught him projection. "Yesterday morning, I was disguised as a homeless person as part of a personal project. A hospital janitor named Marcus Riley shared his lunch with me. Moments later, I was falsely accused of attempted robbery by Charlotte Thornton. Marcus defended me, told the truth about what happened. He was fired for it, publicly humiliated, threatened. Today, I'm here to set the record straight." He played the security footage on a laptop connected to a projector screen someone had brought. 3 angles. Time-stamped. Crystal clear. Jameson never approaching Charlotte's car. Never even looking in her direction. Charlotte walking to her car, getting in, driving away. Then coming back 20 minutes later and pointing at Jameson, creating her false narrative. The crowd murmured. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters started shouting questions. Jameson held up his hand for silence. Charlotte Thornton filed 17 complaints against service workers in the last 5 years. Each one resulted in that worker losing their job. Each one was quietly settled with money from her husband's accounts. Each one was a lie. Marcus Riley is just the latest victim of a woman who uses accusations as a weapon and a man who enables her. More shouting. Questions about proof, about defamation, about hospital liability. Jameson turned to Marcus. You want to say anything? Marcus looked at the cameras, at the reporters, at the crowd of strangers watching him. This morning he'd been invisible. Now he was the center of attention. It should have felt good. It just felt exhausting. But Emma squeezed his hand, and Marcus remembered why he'd spoken up in the first place. I'm not special, Marcus said. His voice was quiet, but the microphones picked it up. I didn't do anything except tell the truth. But apparently, that's revolutionary when you're poor, when you're invisible, when people in power decide that comfort matters more than your truth. He paused. I lost my job, my reputation, almost lost my daughter. Because I wouldn't lie for a rich woman who wanted to play victim. That should horrify all of you. Because it could happen to anyone. It probably has happened to someone you know. And if we don't stand up now, it'll keep happening. The reporters exploded with questions. Marcus stepped back. Jameson handled the rest. Announced he was establishing a legal defense fund for service workers falsely accused by their employers. Announced a foundation in Marcus's wife's name to help families dealing with medical debt. Announced he was pulling all his donations from institutions that had enabled the Thorntons. The press conference lasted 4 to 5 minutes. By the time it ended, the story had already gone viral. Different viral this time. Not as a cautionary tale about aggressive janitors. As a story about justice. About standing up. About the rare moments when power actually protects the vulnerable instead of crushing them. Marcus watched it happen from a distance. Felt like he was observing his own life from outside his body. None of this felt real. Couldn't be real. Yesterday he was invisible. Today he was a symbol. He hated it. And needed it. Both at once. Emma tugged on his hand. Daddy, are the bad people going to go away now? Marcus knelt down. Looked into his daughter's eyes. I don't know, baby. But we told the truth. That's what matters. Mommy would be proud. The words broke something open in Marcus's chest. He pulled Emma into a hug and let himself cry again. But different this time. Not from despair. From relief. From the overwhelming sensation of having survived something that should have destroyed him. Jameson's hand landed on his shoulder. Let's get you both home. Real home. Not that apartment. What do you mean? I own a building downtown. 3-bedroom units. One just became available. Yours if you want it. I can't afford. Already paid for. Year's rent. Consider it part of the restitution package. Marcus started to protest. Stopped. Looked at Emma. At her tired eyes and too thin frame. At the force still attached to her hand. Okay, he said. Thank you. They left through a side entrance. Avoided the remaining reporters. Jameson's driver took them across town to a building Marcus had passed 1,000 times but never imagined entering. The lobby had real art. A doorman. Floors that shined. The apartment was on the 8th floor. 3 bedrooms. 2 bathrooms. A kitchen with appliances that worked. Furniture already in place. Emma ran through the rooms, laughing, touching everything like it might disappear. The bedroom on the left is hers, Jameson said. Already set up. Clothes in the closet. Her size. Toys. Books. Everything a 5-year-old might need. Marcus walked into Emma's new room. Saw the bed with its pink comforter. The stuffed animals arranged on shelves. The desk with art supplies. He sat down on the bed and put his face in his hands. Jameson stood in the doorway. You can cry. It's allowed. I don't know how to accept this. You just do. You let yourself be helped. You let yourself believe that maybe, sometimes, the world doesn't crush you. That sometimes it lifts you up. Why? Marcus looked up. Why does this feel wrong? I should be grateful. I'm grateful. But it feels like I'm betraying everyone else who's still down there. Still invisible. Still getting crushed. Then don't stay up here alone. Jameson sat next to him. Use what I'm giving you. Help others. Be the bridge between the people with nothing and the people with everything. Make sure your survival means something. Emma appeared in the doorway. Daddy, there's food in the kitchen. Real food. Can I eat it? Yes, baby. Eat whatever you want. She disappeared. They heard her opening cabinets, exclaiming over the options. Marcus listened to his daughter's joy and felt the last piece of his resistance crumble. "Okay," he said. "I'll accept this. All of it. But on one condition. Name it. You let me pay it forward. However I can. Whenever I can. This doesn't end with me." Jameson smiled. First real smile Marcus had seen from him. "Deal." They shook hands. And for the first time in 18 months, Marcus Riley let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything really was going to be okay. The lawsuit came 3 days later. Charlotte and Gerald Thornton versus Jameson Cole, Marcus Riley, and County General Hospital. Defamation, emotional distress, loss of reputation. They were seeking $15 million in damages. Jameson's lawyer called it expected. Standard retaliation. Nothing to worry about. The preliminary hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. Municipal Courthouse. Judge Rebecca Martinez presiding. She was known for being fair, thorough, and allergic to bullshit. Both sides considered that good news. Marcus spent those 2 weeks in a state of surreal adjustment. He had food. Emma had gained 4 pounds and her color was back. The apartment was warm. The lights worked. He could take a shower without timing himself. Small things that felt massive. Jameson visited every few days. Brought updates. Brought paperwork. Brought offerings of normalcy that Marcus was still learning to accept. They developed an odd friendship. These two men separated by everything except the shared experience of loss and the accident of a sandwich. "The Thorntons are going to push hard," Jameson said over coffee in Marcus's new kitchen. "Their lawyer is going to paint you as opportunistic. Say you saw a chance to extort a wealthy man and took it. I just told the truth. I know. The jury will know. But we have to be prepared for it to get ugly." It got ugly. The day of the hearing, Marcus wore a suit Jameson had bought him. It fit perfectly. Made him look like someone whose opinion mattered. He hated that clothes could do that. Hated that he'd been invisible for so long, partly because he couldn't afford better fabric. Emma stayed with a neighbor Jameson had vetted. A kind woman named Mrs. Patterson who had grandchildren and made cookies. Marcus had checked on the cookies. Made sure they weren't poisoned. Made sure Emma would be safe. Couldn't quite believe he was allowed to relax about anything. The courthouse was old. Marble floors worn smooth by decades of feet. High ceilings that made voices echo. Marcus walked through the metal detector and felt like he was entering a different world. One where rules mattered. Where truth might actually win. The Thorntons were already in the courtroom. Charlotte wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than Marcus used to make in 3 months. Gerald sat beside her in navy pinstripes, his expression carved from stone. Their lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Delgado, was arranging files on her table with mechanical precision. Jameson's legal team took up half the left side of the room. 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals, a mountain of evidence that had been compiled with terrifying efficiency. Judge Martinez entered. Everyone stood. She was in her 50s, Latina, with eyes that missed nothing and a voice that commanded immediate attention. "Everyone sit. Let's begin." Delgado stood first. "Your Honor, my clients are here because they were victimized twice. First, Mrs. Thornton was threatened by a homeless individual in a hospital parking lot. A terrifying experience that left her traumatized. When she quite reasonably reported this to authorities, she was then publicly accused of lying by Mr. Riley, a disgruntled hospital employee, and Mr. Cole, who has been impersonating a homeless person for unclear and possibly nefarious reasons. At roughly the 300-word mark of this confrontation, as the accusations flew and the courtroom battle began, something profound was happening beyond these walls. People were watching, paying attention. The story had spread through social media, through news coverage, through the quiet networks of people who'd experienced similar injustices. In coffee shops and break rooms and late-night conversations, Marcus's name became shorthand for standing up to power. The case wasn't just about one janitor and one lie anymore. It represented every time truth had been buried under money, every time the vulnerable had been silenced by the comfortable, every time doing right had led to punishment. This was a moment where all of that pushed back. "Your Honor, I have to interrupt." Jameson's lead attorney, a gray-haired man named Chen, stood. This entire premise is false. We have video evidence, time-stamped and verified by 3 independent experts, showing that Mrs. Thornton was never approached, never threatened, and fabricated the entire incident. Furthermore, we have documentation of 17 similar false accusations Mrs. Thornton has made over 5 years, each resulting in terminated employment for the accused. This isn't about one incident. It's about a pattern of behavior that has destroyed lives for sport. Chen pulled up the security footage on a screen. The courtroom watched in silence. 3 angles. Perfect clarity. Jameson sitting on the ground near the dumpsters. Marcus approaching. The sandwich. Their conversation. Charlotte walking to her car. Getting in. Driving away. Then, 20 minutes later, her return. Her pointing. Her manufactured panic. The footage didn't lie. Couldn't lie. It simply showed what happened. Delgado recovered quickly. This footage has been edited. Manipulated. My client maintains. Your client is lying. Judge Martinez's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. I watched 3 different camera angles showing the exact same timeline. Unless you're suggesting a conspiracy involving hospital security systems, your argument is nonsense. She turned to Charlotte. Mrs. Thornton, do you want to change your statement? Charlotte's face had gone red. That video doesn't show everything. I felt threatened. My perception of events. Your perception was factually incorrect. And you've made similar incorrect perceptions 17 times in 5 years, each time resulting in someone losing their job. Martinez looked at the file in front of her. I have the documentation here. Every complaint. Every settlement. Every life you've disrupted because you wanted attention. Gerald Thornton stood. Your Honor, with respect, my wife's medical history. Sit down, Mr. Thornton. The only medical history relevant here is that your wife has used claims of trauma to weaponize the legal system. Martinez turned to Marcus. Mr. Riley, you shared your lunch with someone you thought was homeless. Then you defended him when he was falsely accused. For this, you were fired, publicly humiliated, and threatened. Is that correct? Marcus stood. His legs felt shaky. Yes, Your Honor. And you did this knowing it would cost you your job. I did it because it was the right thing to do. Martinez nodded. The court finds in favor of the defendants on all counts. Mrs. Thornton's claims are dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I'm referring this case to the district attorney for possible prosecution of filing false police reports. Mr. and Mrs. Thornton, you're both banned from filing any future complaints in this jurisdiction without posting a bond of $50,000 to protect against malicious prosecution. The courtroom erupted. Reporters jumped up. The Thorntons' lawyer was objecting, arguing, trying to recover. But Martinez's gavel came down like thunder. That's my ruling. We're done here. Marcus sat down hard, felt Jameson's hand on his shoulder, heard the noise around him like it was coming from underwater. He'd won. Actually won. Truth had mattered more than money. It shouldn't have felt revolutionary. But it did. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting. Marcus didn't want to talk. Wanted to go home to Emma. But Jameson was right. The story mattered. Telling it mattered. How do you feel? One reporter shouted. Marcus thought about that. About Sarah. About Emma's hollow cheeks and the empty cupboards and the 18 months of invisible suffering. I feel like maybe the system works sometimes, he said. Not often. Not enough. But sometimes. And I feel grateful to everyone who stood up when they didn't have to. Because that's the only way anything ever changes. What's next for you? I'm going to hug my daughter. Then I'm going to figure out how to make sure what happened to me doesn't happen to the next person. Because there will be a next person. There always is. More questions. More cameras. Jameson stepped in, fielded the attention, gave Marcus space to breathe. They walked to Jameson's car, drove back to the apartment in silence. Emma was waiting with Mrs. Patterson. She ran to Marcus the moment he walked through the door. Did you win? Yeah, baby. We won. So the bad people can't hurt us anymore. Marcus knelt down, looked into his daughter's eyes, thought about how much he wanted to promise her that bad people would never hurt them again, that the world was safe now, that everything would be perfect. But he'd promised himself he'd never lie to Emma, even when the truth was complicated. Some bad people can always hurt us, he said. But good people can fight back. And sometimes, if we're really lucky and really brave, the good people win. That's what happened today. Emma hugged him. Mommy would be so proud. Yeah, she would. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Marcus and Jameson sat on the apartment balcony and watched the city lights. I've been thinking about the foundation, Jameson said. Sarah's Foundation for Medical Debt Relief. I want you to run it. Marcus turned. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've lived it. You understand what it means to be crushed by medical bills, to have to choose between your child's needs and your own survival. The people we'll be helping need someone who gets it, not another bureaucrat pushing papers. I don't know how to run a foundation. You'll learn. I'll teach you. The lawyers will help. But more important than the mechanics is the mission. And you understand the mission better than anyone. Marcus looked out at the city, at all the buildings full of people who were probably struggling just like he'd struggled. Invisible people in visible pain. Okay, he said, but I want to expand it. Not just medical debt. Everything that crushes people who are trying to survive. Rent assistance. Food programs. Legal defense for workers wrongfully terminated. All of it. Jameson smiled. Done. We'll call it the Sarah Riley Foundation. Broader scope. Real change. They shook hands. Made plans. Talked until midnight about infrastructure and funding and outreach. Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. The sense that his suffering might actually mean something beyond just surviving it. 3 months later, the foundation opened its doors. Small office downtown. Staff of 8. Annual budget of $5 million from Jameson's initial donation and matched funds from other donors who'd heard the story. Marcus learned fast. How to review applications. How to prioritize cases. How to say no when resources were stretched too thin. The job was impossible and necessary and exhausting and fulfilling. Emma thrived. New school. Friends. Therapy to help process her mother's death and the trauma of their poverty. She was still too thin, still had nightmares sometimes, but she was healing, growing, becoming a kid again instead of a tiny adult worried about her father's survival. Jameson's health declined. The liver failure progressed faster than expected. He spent his last weeks helping Marcus transition into full leadership of the foundation, teaching him everything about managing wealth, about leveraging influence, about the 1,000 small ways power could be redirected toward good. You're going to do better than I ever did, Jameson said one afternoon. He was in bed now, too weak to go to the office. But his mind was still sharp. Because you remember what it's like to have nothing. Never forget that. The moment you start thinking of yourself as separate from the people you're helping, you'll lose the thread. I won't forget. Promise me something else. When my kids show up, and they will once I'm gone, don't let them take this away. The foundation stays. The mission continues. That's my legacy, not the buildings or the money. This, I promise. Jameson died on a Tuesday morning in June. His children did show up, just as he'd predicted. They contested the will, tried to dissolve the foundation, claimed their father had been mentally incompetent. The legal battle lasted 8 months. Marcus testified about Jameson's clarity, his purpose, his explicit wishes. The court ruled in the foundation's favor. Jameson's estate funded the Sarah Riley Foundation in perpetuity. His children got their shares, smaller than they'd wanted but enough to keep them comfortable for life. They never spoke to Marcus again. He was fine with that. At roughly the 850-word mark in this chapter, as Marcus stood in the foundation's growing office space and looked at the wall of photos showing families they'd helped, he thought about how all of this had started with a sandwich. One decision to share when he had nothing to spare. One choice to stand up when staying silent would have been easier. The ripples from that moment had spread farther than he could have imagined. Hundreds of families freed from medical debt. Dozens of workers protected from wrongful termination. A network of support that kept growing, kept reaching, kept proving that systemic change was possible when enough people refused to look away. If you've made it this far in this story, if Marcus's journey has meant something to you, then I'm asking you one last time to help spread this message. Hit that like button to show the algorithm that that stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things deserve to be seen. Drop a comment sharing your own story of standing up or being helped, because your voice adds to the chorus that demands better. Subscribe to this channel so you'll hear for every story about people who refuse to stay invisible. Share this video with someone who needs to remember that kindness matters, that truth can win, that sometimes the universe rewards the good. And check the description below for links to organizations doing this work in real life. Because Marcus's story doesn't have to be fiction. We can make this kind of support real for people in our own communities. Your engagement here translates to real change out there. Don't underestimate the power of your participation. 6 months after Jameson's death, the foundation had helped 347 families. The number kept Marcus up some nights. Not from stress, but from the weight of it. 347 families who might have ended up where he'd been. Hungry, desperate, invisible. The work was hard. Every application was a story of suffering. Every approval felt like too little too late. Every rejection haunted him. But he kept going because stopping wasn't an option. Because Emma was watching. Because Jameson's ghost was watching. Because Sarah's memory deserved more than just survival. On a Tuesday in November, exactly 2 years after the day he'd shared his sandwich, Marcus got a call from County General Hospital. They wanted to honor him with a humanitarian award. Wanted him to give a speech at their annual gala. The same hospital that had fired him was now celebrating him. Marcus wanted to say no. Wanted to tell them where they could put their award. But his staff convinced him that visibility mattered. That using the platform would help more families. So he agreed. The gala was black tie. Marcus wore a tuxedo that felt like a costume. Emma wore a purple dress she'd picked out herself and patent leather shoes that clicked when she walked. She was 7 now. Taller. Healthier. Still had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn conviction that right mattered more than easy. The ballroom was full of the kind of people Marcus used to clean up after. Doctors, administrators, board members, donors. They applauded when he walked to the podium to accept his award. The same people who'd let him be fired for telling the truth now celebrated him for surviving their cruelty. Marcus looked out at the crowd. At Gerald Thornton, who'd been forced to resign from the hospital board but still attended events like this one. At the administrator who'd signed his termination papers. At nurses who'd watched him be escorted out by security and said nothing. He thought about the speech he'd prepared. Gracious, professional, forward-looking. He thought about how easy it would be to just read it and sit down and let everyone feel good about themselves. Then he looked at Emma in the front row, and he remembered why any of this mattered. "Thank you for this award," Marcus said. "I don't deserve it. I shared a sandwich. That's not heroic. That's basic human decency. What would have been heroic is if this hospital had stood by me when I told the truth. What would have been heroic is if the people in this room had questioned why a janitor was fired for defending a homeless man. What would have been heroic is if anyone had checked the security footage before ruining my life." The room went silent. People shifted in their seats. The administrator's face went pale. "I'm not saying this to make you feel bad. I'm saying it because we have to be honest about how we got here. The Sarah Riley Foundation exists because the systems that should protect people don't. Because telling the truth shouldn't cost you everything. Because poverty shouldn't be a death sentence." Marcus paused. "This hospital fired me, then celebrated me. Think about that. Think about how broken a system has to be for both of those things to be true." He held up the crystal award they'd given him. Shaped like a heart. Heavy and expensive and meaningless. "I'm accepting this not because I want your approval, but because it comes with a platform. And I'm using that platform to say that every person in this room with power has a responsibility to use it better. To look at the invisible people around you. To ask why your janitors don't make enough to feed their families. To question why medical debt exists at all in the richest country in the world. To stand up when someone is being treated unjustly, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it costs you something." Emma started clapping. Slowly at first. Then other people joined. Not everyone, but enough. The applause grew. Some people stood. The administrator looked like he wanted to crawl under his table. Marcus walked off the stage. Hugged Emma. They left together before the dinner service started. Walked out of that ballroom full of uncomfortable wealthy people and into the November night air. That was a good speech, Daddy. Yay. Yay. Mommy would have liked it. They walked to the car. Marcus's car now. Not expensive, but reliable. Paid for. They drove home through streets Marcus had walked when he had nothing. Past the subsidized housing complex where they'd nearly been evicted. Past the food pantry where he'd begged for donations. Past the hospital entrance where he'd shared a sandwich with a stranger. The city looked different now. Same buildings, same streets, but different somehow. Because Marcus was different. Because he'd survived. Because he'd learned that sometimes the universe pays attention and sometimes it doesn't. But you keep doing right anyway because that's the only way to stay human. Emma fell asleep in the car. Marcus carried her upstairs to their apartment, tucked her into bed, kissed her forehead. She mumbled something about princesses and heroes and drifted back to sleep. Marcus stood in her doorway and watched her breathe. Thought about how close they'd come to losing everything. How a sandwich and a truth and an old man in disguise had changed the trajectory of their entire lives. He walked to his bedroom, pulled out the photo he kept in his nightstand. Sarah on their wedding day, smiling, healthy, full of hope for a future she'd never get to see. "We're okay," Marcus whispered to the photo. "Emma's okay. I kept my promise." He put the photo back, lay down in bed, closed his eyes. Tomorrow he'd go back to the foundation. Review more applications. Approve more help. Make more calls. Fight more battles. The work never ended. The need never ended. But neither did the purpose. Marcus Riley slept well that night. Not because everything was perfect, but because he knew that when it mattered most, he'd chosen truth over safety, kindness over cruelty, courage over silence. And in a world that often rewards the opposite, that was enough. 6 months later, on a spring morning that reminded Marcus of the day Sarah died, he received a letter. Plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 sentences written in careful cursive. "I was the old man at the bus stop last week. You paid my fare when my card wouldn't work. You don't remember me, but I remember you. Thank you." Marcus sat at his desk and read the note 3 times. He didn't remember paying anyone's fare. Didn't remember a bus stop or an old man. But that was the point, wasn't it? Kindness should be so ordinary, so automatic, that you don't even register doing it. He pinned the note to his office wall, next to photos of families the foundation had helped, next to Emma's drawings of superheroes, next to a faded newspaper clipping about a janitor who'd defended a homeless man and changed everything. The foundation grew. Other cities reached out, wanted to replicate the model. Marcus trained staff, shared resources, built a network of support that stretched across 12 states. Emma grew too. 8 years old, then 9, then 10, smart and stubborn and unafraid to ask hard questions about why the world was the way it was. Marcus answered as honestly as he could, taught her that systems could change, that individuals mattered, that a sandwich could start a revolution if you were paying attention. On the 3rd anniversary of Jameson's death, they held a memorial service. Small gathering. Foundation staff. A few of Jameson's old colleagues. Marcus gave a eulogy about a man who'd spent 50 years building an empire and 3 years learning to be human. About how it's never too late to get the important things right. Jameson's daughter Linda showed up. Stood in the back. Didn't speak to anyone. But she stayed for the whole service. Left an envelope on Marcus's desk afterward. Inside was a check for $500,000 made out to the Sarah Riley Foundation and a note that said simply, "He was right about you." The money funded an expansion, new programs, more staff, a partnership with legal aid organizations to protect workers from retaliation. Everything Jameson had wanted and more. Marcus worked 60-hour weeks, came home tired but purposeful, helped Emma with homework, made dinner that didn't come from a food pantry. Read her stories about heroes who looked like ordinary people doing extraordinary things. On quiet nights, when Emma was asleep and the city hummed outside his window, Marcus thought about parallel universes, about the version of his life where he'd kept his mouth shut in that parking lot, where he'd stayed invisible, where fear had been stronger than truth. That version of Marcus was probably still poor, probably still invisible, probably still crushed under the weight of systems designed to keep him there. But this version, the real version, the one who'd shared a sandwich and refused to lie, This version got to watch his daughter grow up safe. Got to help hundreds of families avoid the suffering he'd endured. Got to prove that sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, the universe bent toward justice. It wasn't a perfect life. The medical debt was paid, but the grief over Sarah never left. The trauma of those hungry months still woke him some nights, heart pounding, convinced they'd lost everything again. Emma still had nightmares. The work at the foundation was endless and often felt inadequate. But it was a good life, a meaningful life, a life that mattered beyond just survival. And on Tuesday mornings, Marcus still bought an extra sandwich, kept it in his bag, walked through the city with his eyes open, looking for someone who needed it. Because kindness was a muscle that atrophied if you didn't exercise it. Because the world stayed broken if everyone waited for someone else to fix it. Because a sandwich had saved his life, and maybe, someday, one of his would save someone else's. That was the point of all of it. Not the foundation or the award or the apartment or the stability. Those were just tools. The point was remembering what it felt like to have nothing and using that memory to make sure fewer people had to experience it. The point was staying human in a world that constantly pressured you to become hard. The point was teaching Emma that her father had been scared and hungry and desperate, and he'd still chosen to share, still chosen to speak up, still chosen right over easy. Because someday Emma would face her own parking lot moment, her own choice between silence and truth. And Marcus wanted her to know that truth was worth it, that kindness mattered, that one person standing up could change everything. Years passed. The foundation thrived. Emma grew into a teenager with her mother's compassion and her father's stubborn streak. She volunteered at the foundation, helped review applications, talked to families about their father's story, became living proof that children of trauma could become agents of change. Marcus's hair grayed at the temples. Lines appeared around his eyes. His back ached from too many years of physical labor. But he was healthy, stable, surrounded by people who respected the work he did and the man he'd become. On the 10th anniversary of the sandwich, the foundation held a gala, raised $3 million in one night, celebrated a decade of helping families break free from the systems that crushed them. Marcus gave a speech, shorter this time, just 2 minutes. He told the story of a peanut butter sandwich made by a 5-year-old girl, about sharing it with a stranger, about refusing to lie when lying would have been easier, about how that choice rippled outward in ways he never could have predicted. None of us know which moments matter, Marcus said. Which choices will echo, which actions will change everything. So we have to treat every moment like it matters, every person like they are worth defending, every truth like it's worth telling. Because maybe it is, and maybe we're the only ones who will stand up, and maybe that's enough. The crowd stood, applauded. The sound washed over Marcus like a wave. He looked out at hundreds of faces, people who'd donated, people who'd been helped, people who'd heard the story and decided to join the work. But mostly he looked at Emma, 15 now, beautiful and strong and kind, standing in the front row with tears on her face and pride in her eyes. Everything Marcus had survived, everything he'd fought for, everything he'd built, it was all for her. For the world she'd inherit. For the proof that suffering didn't have to be permanent. That broken systems could be challenged. That ordinary people doing ordinary acts of kindness could accumulate into something extraordinary. After the gala, Marcus and Emma walked home through the city streets. Same route they'd taken 10 years ago when they had nothing. The city had changed. Gentrification had swept through some neighborhoods. Others remained stubbornly poor. The gap between the haves and have-nots had widened in some ways, narrowed in others. But the Sarah Riley Foundation was still there, still fighting, still helping, one family at a time, one sandwich at a time. "Daddy," Emma said as they walked, "do you ever wish you just kept quiet that day? Like, your life would have been so much easier." Marcus thought about that. About the hunger and the fear and the moment he thought he'd lose her. About the price he'd paid for telling the truth. "No," he said, "because easy isn't the same as right. And right is what lets you sleep at night. What lets you look your kid in the eye and tell her the world is worth fighting for." Emma nodded, slipped her hand into his the way she used to when she was small. They walked in comfortable silence, father and daughter, through a city that had tried to crush them and failed. Behind them, the Foundation's lights stayed on. Inside, staff worked late, processing applications, making calls, changing lives. The work continued, would always continue, because need was infinite, but so was the capacity for people to care. Above them, the stars were invisible behind city lights. But Marcus knew they were there anyway. Same way he knew Sarah was proud of him. Same way he knew that somewhere in this city, someone was facing their own impossible choice. Their own moment of truth. And maybe, if Marcus and Emma and the Foundation and everyone who'd heard this story kept working, kept fighting, kept choosing right over easy, maybe that person would make the brave choice too. Maybe they'd share their sandwich. Maybe they'd tell the truth. Maybe they'd refuse to stay silent when silence was the safest option. And maybe, just maybe, the world would bend a little more toward justice. One choice at a time. One sandwich at a time. One truth at a time. That was the work. That was the point. That was enough. Marcus Riley walked home with his daughter's hand in his. A good man who'd survived bad circumstances and chosen to use that survival to help others do the same. Not a hero, just a human being who remembered what it felt like to be invisible and decided that everyone deserved to be seen. The story didn't end there, of course. Stories like this never really end. They just keep rippling outward, touching lives in ways the original actors never witness. But this is where we leave Marcus and Emma. Safe. Together. Fighting the good fight. And somewhere in this city, right now, someone is facing their own parking lot moment. Their own choice between comfort and courage. Their own chance to prove that kindness still matters in a world that often forgets. What will they choose? What would you choose? The answer to that question is the only story that really matters. Because we're all just one sandwich away from changing someone's life. We're all just one truth away from standing up to power. We're all just one choice away from proving that the good guys can win. So go. Share your sandwich. Tell your truth. Stand up when standing up costs you something. The world is watching. And sometimes, rarely, but sometimes, it rewards the brave.